let's talk about what I read in July. So, still figuring out how I'm doing wrap-ups. July, I didn't even really read that much, so I'm hoping this is going to be shorter. But I also want to talk about stats because one of my goals of the year is to reduce my physical TBR. So far, I'm not doing a great job. So at the start of July, not including my collection I have up there, I had 165 books on my TBR. I bought 9. And one of those I had read before I bought it. So I put 8 new books on my TBR. And then I read 4 books off of my physical TBR. So I ended up at 170 at the end. So started at 165, ended at 170. I'm kind of hoping to get back down to 165 in August, but it's halfway through the month and I'm doing a sufficiently good job about that, but I also bought new books. So, the non-real struggle that I turn into a struggle, In the month of July, I read 2 books from the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. I read A Close and Common Orbit and Record of a Spaceborn Few. That's books 2 and 3. I read The Push by Ashley Adrain, House of Salt and Sorrow by Erin A. Craig, Darryl by Jackie Ess, and The Two Towers. I have dedicated reviews for the Wayfarer series, both of them, A Close and Common Orbit and A Record of a Spaceborn Few, but I don't think the third one is up yet. I will just say that if you're interested in reading the series and you've not read the first, or you have read the first, book 2 and 3 do a really good job of really being companion novels in the sense that it all does take place in the same universe. You do need, or it would be nice to have some of the information from the first book while you're reading the second and third. You will spoil yourself if you try to read the second or third book before you read the first, but the second and third book aren't related. What I like about this series is the versatility of not just plot, but of structure of plot. In the first book, you're following a big group of characters all together at all times, and in the second book, you're following 2 main characters, and you have 2 different timelines going on, so you're doing that timeline back and forth thing, which if you don't like, you might not like the second one. And then in the third one, you're following a large cast of characters again, but they don't all know each other, and it all takes place on the human Exodus fleet that left Earth hundreds of years ago. I would say of the 2, I preferred personally the second book. The third book is very human-centric, which is not my favorite part of the series. I prefer the interactions with other aliens, and I think that the third book was harder to get into because you have all of these different perspectives going on, but the third book did surprise me because it had a plot point. Most of these are very happy going, and it has something happen that I just wasn't expecting for how books 1 and 2 went, because there is stakes and there are things that are going on, but I wasn't prepared for what happened, we'll just say that. But I enjoyed them. Reviews will be linked if I remember. And yeah, let's just talk about other books. Okay, next we're going to talk about House of Salt and Sorrow by Erin A. Craig. So this is a YA high fantasy, and it takes place in a I would say a gothic type ocean environment, you're on the ocean. It's definitely based on the same people that Theon Greyjoy from a Game of Thrones family is inspired by. They're people of the salt, people of the ocean, and when people die, they send the dead back to the ocean. And it's also inspired by the 12 Dancing Princesses, which I believe is a Grimm fairy tale. I have not read that original, so I didn't really know what to expect there. I did read the synopsis of it after I was done, and I think it puts an interesting twist on the retelling that might be unexpected. There are these 12 sisters, the 12 dancing princesses. Their dad is like king, essentially, of the area. And it starts off with us at the funeral for one of the girls. And many of the older sisters have died in circumstances. And some of them started out strange or normal or not unexpected totally, and then they keep getting more and more unexpected and more strange. And now, like, the town people and everyone thinks that there's a curse on the family, and the family is starting to think that there's a curse on the family. Your protagonist is, I think she's technically an adult. I think she's 18 or 19, and you have some that are like 16 and then some that are younger. And it's kind of like all around the dancing of the princesses, like them going out at night and dancing together, and also like, is someone trying to kill them? So it's like a fantasy mystery, I would say, and it's more on like the thriller side of things, where we're not like focusing on finding clues. We're much more focused on the thrilling aspects of the plot. I was hooked enough to keep reading, and as time went on, I got more and more interested in the plot, and it went to places I wasn't totally expecting it to. She took it there. Like, so I definitely thought like the stakes were pretty high, and I kind of liked where it went. For a YA, like, I mean, I don't read a lot, so I guess I'm not a good gauge of what YA is like, but it was pretty dark. Like, shit went down. It got gross at times. Like, there was death happening. So yeah, that's just something to be mindful of. It was pretty gruesome. There is like that dreaded love triangle that happens, which it's not really a love triangle. It's more of like a lust triangle. Like, she basically, your protagonist just wants the attention of like two different people at the same time, because like, I mean, what teenager doesn't want attention, I guess? There were too many girls. It's the 12 dancing princesses, so I get it, and some of them were dead before it started, so you didn't have 12. They didn't have distinct enough personalities for me to really care about any of them, except like for the main ones they kind of picked out that I should care about more. All of the girls acted and were treated a lot younger than they were. Like, from what my recollection, our protagonist is like 18 or 19, and like her dad tells her what she can and can't do, and they get into these weird fights. And I'm like, girl, you're an adult, like, just say no, what? So that was something that bothered me. I feel like you could have aged down the characters and it would have worked a lot better. And the writing, it had moments of being very descriptive, and it would pull me into like the scenery of it, but then it had certain moments where it felt a little overwritten. And I think that this was a debut, so I feel like that's something that the author will finesse a bit more with time. Overall, like, by the halfway point, like, it wasn't dragging. I didn't dislike the beginning, but by the halfway point, I was, like, convinced, and I was like, let's find out what's happening here. So, yeah, something like a little bit out of the wheelhouse of things I normally read, but I was kind of looking for that type of stuff right now. So, if you don't mind gruesome YA, I would recommend it. Okay, let's next talk about Darryl by Jackie Ess. I picked this up because I saw Scott and Nell at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot discussing this on their channel and highly recommending it. And my library didn't have it, but it is on Kindle Unlimited, so I was able to read it through there. It is short, and it has short chapters, so it's very consumable. However, I would suggest reading it all in one go, like sitting it down and just consuming it consistently, or like reading it over the course of one day. I didn't do that. I read it over the course of a week, and I would just read a few chapters every night, and it was like a good cadence, but I would kind of forget what was happening because everything was so tied in on itself, and it was constantly like reflecting back to things he had said in the last chapter. And I guess if you have a really great memory and that's like maybe the only book you're reading, it would be fine. But I'm not going to remember everything about a book. I'm going to remember the general things and like the themes of the book. So I think I did myself a disservice by reading it over the course of so many days. Let's talk about the synopsis. So it is about a man in his 40s, which, as I have said on this channel before, is not something I am normally intrigued by. But it is about a man in his 40s, and he is married, and his son, who maybe isn't actually his son, but his son doesn't know that, is at college. And him and his wife start bringing other people into their relationship and start to, like, he is identifying now as a cuckold. And the whole book is really a character study of this man as he, in his 40s, starts to explore his sexuality, his gender. The writing is simple and to the point. You're in Darryl's head, and he starts out, there's so much you could talk about with this book. He starts out like not doing well. He is addicted to G. The writing kind of comes across like that. He feels very unreliable. He gets sober when you read, and so like the writing I found got a lot more clarity around it. In the first few chapters I was very confused. And yeah, he makes friendships, he questions his friendships, he questions other people's identities, he questions his identity. I feel like there are so many different ways that you could look at this book. Like, I could reread this book through so many different lenses, and I'm going to be picking up on different things every time. And yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit. It was one of those books that's so conversational and so easy to read, but it hits on so many topical points and is thought-provoking. And yeah, it's really unlike anything I've ever read before. Scott and Nell have a review of this, as does Kevy, and I'm gonna post those two reviews because they look at totally different contexts of the narrative in their review, and that's what I think is really interesting about this book, is that I think that you could talk about this book with tons of different people who have read it, and they're all going to bring up and talk about different things. I would just highly recommend it to anyone who is at all intrigued by what people's reviews have to say about it. I think what's interesting about it too is that, like, in a lot of YA, we're doing this coming of age thing where someone is like exploring their identity, and I had a hard time with the protagonist being 40 and exploring his identity in this way. Like, to me, I was like, how has he not ever taken the time to do this? How has he not figured this out before? I'm like, are there really people like that? Which I'm sure there are. Like, I'm sure there are. There are plenty of people who kind of just maybe weren't aware of sexuality and gender as much because it used to not come up in the mainstream, or maybe like we're kind of just like coasting through life, and then one day like found out that they were in like a cuckold situation and decided to start exploring those things, and then explores it through the secondary characters. It was just fascinating. It was fascinating. Okay, and then the only other book I'm going to briefly talk about is The Two Towers by Tolkien. I am doing a buddy read with Mariana at Mariana Moss Books, and yeah, for the month of July, we were reading this, and I quite enjoyed my experience yet again. The Two Towers is book 3 and 4 of The Lord of the Rings. Book 3 is where you're following everyone but Frodo and Sam, and I preferred those sections. I think that it added a lot that didn't happen in the movies. I have a vlog where I vlog my thoughts on this, and I watched the movie after and was like, no. I was mad a lot of my experience watching the movie because I was like, why did they change this? Why did they do this? Like, this was so much more interesting in the book. But I really loved the development of the relationships between the characters in book 3. I found the Ents and their story much more fascinating in the books. I loved so many of Treebeard's lines in it. Yeah, I just had a good time with it. So if you wanted my thoughts in a bit more detail, watch the vlog. Yeah, I didn't really read much in July. Let me know if any of these books sound intriguing to you, or if you're planning to read any of them, especially Darryl. And until next time, happy reading.